November 24th, 1969, Miami, Florida. Letter enclosing manuscript of Hotline to Heaven. Charles, dear, before you read this, ask God's Holy Spirit to reveal to you any weaknesses or needs in the book, will you? And pray for the response and the effect of the book. Because I believe in prayer, Francis. Houston, Texas. Monday, November 24th, 1969. Dear Fran, this one must be short after the 12 pages I mailed this morning. This, of course, has been another fabulous day, to wit. 1. June. Last night she said a man at their office just didn't rub her right and irritated her, so we talked of loving your enemies. I suggested that she read the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians every morning, and every time she feels bugged by him to say to herself, I love you. And if she felt like it, to say it out loud to him. About 10 this morning, she phoned to say that when he came by her desk, she smiled and in a very friendly manner said, Good morning. And he, surprised, came back in a little while to talk. He needed 2 new employees, and by noon, God had supplied both for him. June knows what we mean by turning loose, full surrender, and she has had 3 or 4 things happen already to see how God acts when we ask and expect him to do what he wants, not what we plan. I think it was Saturday when she had Ian Thomas's book, Saving Life of Christ. She passed by a friend's apartment below hers. The door was open and a policeman was inside, so June inquired to find that her friend's TV console had been stolen. Her friend was completely lost. What am I going to do without a TV? June said, read this book. And so she recognized another of God's convenient ways. Today, her boss and another executive became friendly for the first time in a year. Quite eventful for someone new to complete surrender. PTL. She is joining our choir tomorrow night. Number 2. You may recall the lady accountant we hired about 2 weeks ago because God said no to one we selected, and then right after noon, Dixie came in. She's a fine Christian and a most excellent accountant. I feel very close to her and get excited telling her of the fantastic events. Today, she told me what God really did to send her to us. Her husband had come home for no particular reason about 10 o'clock that morning, and out of a clear blue sky mentioned to her that he thought she was going to go to work. She said probably after Thanksgiving. Then the phone rang. Her friend, an employment agent, also a friend of our secretary, was calling Dixie and said she had a good prospective job. Dixie hadn't even applied, and for her to come down right away, although she thought the position was filled. Dixie said she wasn't dressed. The agent said, put on anything but hurry. Dixie did, and was in our office afternoon talking about the job and God, and went home to tell her husband she had a job. She is quite excited about being part of the fabulous day because I told her within 30 minutes after she arrived that God had sent her. What am I going to tell you new when I get to Miami? I'll just bask in your spiritual sunshine and listen. Just made reservations and might change the return trip. 12/23 Tuesday. Leave Houston at 7 a.m. Flight 28. National Airlines to Tampa, Florida. Arrive at 10:32 a.m. My brother and his wife will meet me and drive to Miami, with me exciting them for 5 hours about a living God and what turning loose really means. 12/23 Tuesday night. I will call you when I get there. Fabulous. 12/23 to New Year's. I'm yours as much as you can put up with me, but I'll get out of your way and be with them. Don't know where I'll stay, but we'll find out from them soon and let you know. Please don't plan to disrupt your plans for such a long stay, but just let me know times you do have me included, and you have number 1 AAA priority. My brother, his wife, and I will leave Miami on New Year's Day or the 2nd to go to Bessemer. He wants me to speak in Sunday service. Now, isn't that something? I've never done anything like that. But if God lets these plans all go through, He will do the talking. I didn't plan to stay so long, but I felt God nudge and say do it while talking to Clyde tonight. So, I'll have plenty of new excitement after visiting you. Wow! This is going to be the greatest New Year's ever, and I've got a feeling 1970 will be a whole year of the greatest in both our lives. I'm really anxious to get Hotline to Heaven and drink in every thrilling word and cry right along with you as the Holy Spirit talks of His power when He has such an invitation to run a life fully given to Him. It's really sad that God tries to get Christians to understand this is for all, and so few trust Him enough to accept His phenomenal gifts. Hurry with your manuscript. This is a great privilege to be close enough to you to be invited to read it, and I'm really longing for it. I already know it's tremendous. I'm leaving Houston early Thursday morning to go to Corpus Christi to spend Thanksgiving with my parents, and Friday afternoon to a lake 50 miles from Corpus to see my oldest brother Milton and his wife Mary, and we'll return Saturday by 6 or 7 p.m. Hope your manuscript arrives before I leave. I've been writing an hour and 7 pages, a short letter, but I sort of like visiting you, and this is second best to talking to you. Next best is a letter from you. With God's richest blessings on your new book and you, I bid you good night. Charles. Monday, November 24th, 1969, Miami, Florida. Dearest Charles, just a quick note to let you know I'm probably the baggiest-eyed gal in Miami today. I was so completely wound up after sharing with you last night that I simply couldn't go to sleep. Peculiarly, because of all the personal things I hear while I'm on tour, I've learned never to open my mouth and never to share my personal thoughts with anyone. And all of a sudden, I've discovered a desire to share each and every excitement with you. I went to an absolutely fabulous breakfast this morning, even if I was baggy-eyed. Several businessmen asked me to come to a breakfast this morning to discuss the possibility of having a soul-saving station at the county youth fair, which will be held here in January. You know, one of those step right up, have the 4 spiritual laws read to you, absolutely free. I've never been involved completely in one of these things, but I think it could be an absolutely fabulous thing, don't you? So if you hear that I've turned out to be a barker in a circus, you'll know why. I'm a fool for Christ's sake. Whose fool are you? Don't tell me, because I know you're a fool for Christ's sake too. And that's scriptural, because that's what Paul said. Tonight I'm going to dinner with Pat Boone. How about that? Well, not really, but they're having the initial banquet concerning a Miami Christian TV station, and I've been invited. I think it's going to be a fabulous thing. I heard about this a couple of years ago. I'm going with the president of the Fellowship of Churches, Pappy Howland, and his wife, Ted Place, executive director of Youth for Christ, and a couple of others. I'm taking a woman along who needs to have a deeper spiritual commitment to Christ. It's peculiar. It seems like all your spiritual enrichment work is with women, and I really shy away from the men because so many times I discover they think they're going to fall in love with me, so I have to turn them over to the pastor or to other men. I'm sure you are discovering the same thing. When you are of spiritual assistance to someone, they temporarily look upon you as Jesus Christ, and then comes the battle of making them keep their eyes on Christ. I may have told you, when I first became a Christian, I honestly thought my pastor was Jesus Christ. And he had a time convincing me that he wasn't, because every time I'd thank him for something, he'd say, "Don't thank me, thank the Lord." But it's funny how this experience has been so invaluable in my own life, because my request to each church has always been that when I leave, they would not remember me. Or Francis Gardner, as I put it, but would only remember that God's Holy Spirit had moved in their life. And I pray that they only see Christ and nothing else. As a matter of fact, Gulf Coast was a good example of this because at the last service there, I made them sing, "Let Me See Jesus Only." The kids especially have a tendency to put a human on a pedestal, but this does nothing for their Christian life. And that was why I kept it so very essential to remind them to keep their eyes on Christ. I remember the story of Peter, who did so well walking on the water until he took his eyes off of Christ, and then glub, 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 down he went. I'm not going to write you any more because I don't want to take any more time of yours. I want you to use it reading my newest book. I'm sure I don't have to tell you to be careful to see it is not read by others because of the copyright infringement, but somehow or other, I wanted to share it with you. Charles, this will probably be the last letter you get before Thanksgiving, unless the mail is exceptionally fast. But I do want you to know that in my Thanksgiving prayers, there's a very special one thanking God for changing my mind concerning the first thing I ever said about you. You must remember, I knew nothing about you, and you may also have noticed the ice in my voice when I talked to you on the telephone. And when I hung up, I said to the girl who was also working, "That dirty old man, he asked me if I wanted to stay at his house." And then I went on to say, "What does he think I am? And who does he think he is?" And you will remember I asked you to contact the college president because he was making all the arrangements. And yet I wondered what made me turn the page of my schedule when I got it to look first of all to see if your name was on there. And it was. There are so many things I have to be thankful for this year, and knowing you is right at the top of the list. Because he loves, I love. Francis. Handwritten note. Charles, may this be your most blessed Thanksgiving, and may God pour out upon you even greater blessings in this coming year. P.S. I'm going to let you teach my Sunday school class while you're here. More on the holiday season in my Lex letter. Continuation. Don't you wish I'd shut up? Please remember to pray for God's traveling mercies as we drive on Thanksgiving Day to Clearwater for the youth convention. And then pray that God will make me a blessing to all the youth who will be attending my conferences on witnessing. We're having a pitch-in dinner and special service Thanksgiving Eve. These we always do by candlelight, and they're fabulous. No more until later. If I don't stop, this will never get mailed. Just remembered something else, though. I had called my publisher last night to tell them the last chapter was en route, and they told me that Go Man Go had its third printing last week, and it's only 7 months old. Francis. Miami, Florida, November 25th, 1969. Dearest Charles, Joan brought a typewriter home from the office to do some school typing, and it's still here. So I thought I'd type you a few lines before I go to work today. Isn't it awful to feel like I did last night, that I just had to share with you the excitement of Pat and Shirley Boone? I have never seen a couple where the love of Christ shone through both of them in their personal love affair. It was so completely thrilling to me, I just melted. And if you don't think I was having a time with my old contact floating, whenever I get emotional like that, it fogs my contact and sure makes seeing hard. The woman sitting next to me said, if they'd said one more sentence, I would have cried. I said, they didn't stop soon enough for me not to cry. PTL. It was just gorgeous. Probably the reason it affected me so much was it made me think of the life of Tom and Jan. Last night, when I left them at the office to run home and get dressed, Brant, my grandson, was charging around the parking lot in his walker. He really is a doll, but I could be prejudiced. And Tom and Jan were standing there, and I looked at these two good-looking, beautiful people. Jan is 5'1", tiny and blonde and beautiful. Tom is 6'3", brown-eyed and dark and considered very handsome. And just speculated on what could happen to their marriage when Christ takes first place. And then I looked at them as they really are, without Christ, and so completely lost. It's pathetic. I just said, when, Lord, when? Pat Boone had just finished making a movie of The Cross and the Switchblade, where he portrays David Wilkerson. I haven't seen a movie in 3 years, but that's going to be on my list somehow, somewhere. He told us standing on a corner in Harlem preaching as David Wilkerson. And then they asked him to come back and preach as Pat Boone. So he went back. And he said, if anyone ever told me a year ago that I'd be standing on a street corner preaching, I would never have believed it. And then he told me how he and Shirley have found the real joy through total surrender. He said they're not concerned about their future or about his job or anything else because they're safe and secure in God's plan. It was so typical of what you write and how I feel, and so untypical of the majority of Christians. Talk about a couple who hang loose with Jesus. I couldn't help but feel what a boon, and what a pun that is, they are to the married couples of today who are missing something in their marriage. I don't know if I mentioned to you that I had taken both of my books along to give them. And when I did, Pat said, "Oh, we've got Go Man Go." I promised them a copy of Hotline when it comes off the press. By the way, if you'll look at the inside cover of the Bookstore Journal, you will see an ad for his new album, Raptured, which contains all songs about the second coming of Christ. He said, if that ceiling opened up right now and we all went straight up, it would be all right with me. I looked at my telephone last night after I hung up, and it brought to my mind the part in my book about the direct line to God that we all have. And I was probably more impressed with this last night than I ever have been, because I have one of those small phones with the buttons and the receiver. Do you have those in Houston yet? And all I did was to push 1713000000, and there you were. Are you aware of the fact that it's more trouble and work to call you up than it is to call up God? Never quite thought about it that way before. Joan really enjoyed last night. I know you'll enjoy meeting Joan. She's my butterball, but losing weight, PTL. And she has a far greater spiritual depth than most 16-year-olds. And don't think when you meet her, she's taller than I am. And this spiritual depth is fabulous, but it makes it difficult for her with other kids her own age because they just can't understand. I've told her not to worry because in the final analysis, she'll see who comes out on top, but she loves to go to things like last night. She really enjoys being around the college kids in Campus Crusade for Christ because they live and breathe the same Christ that she does. She was really floating on a cloud when we came home. Can't wait for the mailman to bring your letters. I used to watch the mail for the checks coming into the office and then finally got around to opening the rest of the stuff. But now I throw the checks to one side and look for that Houston postmark. And that reminds me, you better be careful because I've saved all your letters and might print a book called Letters from Charles. Your letters are so beautiful, Charles, because I see the Christ in you and everything you write. And I can almost actually feel the love of God which flows from every word. And I know how long it takes to write letters in longhand and how tedious it is. And that's why I probably doubly appreciate them because I know what you have to give up to write to me. I'm really praying that the Lord will show me all the people He wants you to meet in Miami. I want your holiday season to be absolutely perfect. So I don't want to mess it up with individuals who just don't hang in there with God. But then I also wonder if a few of them might not be good too, because I still believe there is more Christianity caught than ever was taught. And yet in your case, from what little I know, it would seem to me the great closeness you have with God was caused by all the reading that you did during Jean's illness. I was so delighted to know that you're going to spend Thanksgiving with your folks. I'm sure they'll enjoy having you with them, and you may feel free to read them whatever parts of the book you want to. I forgot to ask you, are they Christians? That's probably a dumb question to ask, but I never take anything for granted. Well, Christian or not, I'll be praying that your visit with them will enlarge their idea of what Christ can do in a totally surrendered life. I couldn't help but think that this year brought great sorrow into your life, but from the sorrow arose the greatest victory in your life. and it reminded me of the tragedy of losing the sight of one of my eyes was the thing that brought me the greatest victory. Do you ever notice that people who have actually reached the heights have been sent there through tragedy? Not always, but in many, many instances, this is the case. And then this person is the type who really seeks more and more and more of God. I was reading from the Living Letters this morning, Colossians 3:10 and 11. You are living a brand new kind of life that is ever learning more and more of what is right and trying to be more and more like Christ, who created this new life within you. In this new life, one's nationality or race or education or social position is unimportant. Such things mean nothing. Whether a person has Christ is what matters, and he is equally available to all. I love that part. Whether a person has Christ is what matters. And that's all that really matters, isn't it? Because then we know we can relax and have absolutely no concern for the future, knowing that he is leading us the right way. Then I read the love chapter in 1 Corinthians, which is in the Revised Standard is one of the most beautiful of all the passages. I guess it's because I cut my spiritual teeth on the Revised Standard that I particularly like that version, and especially the 13th chapter. Again, my thoughts will be with you on Thanksgiving Day, and my prayers will be joining with yours, because there are times when I'm praying and somehow or other, I know your prayers are joining mine on the way up to God. May God grant you traveling mercies as you go to Corpus Christi. May he make you a blessing to all you meet while you're there, and then may he bring you safely back to Houston. And may he, through all of this, enrich your life to a greater degree than you ever dreamed possible. In his abiding love, Francis.